Hey guys, and welcome to Let's Click Photography. My name's Dave, and over the last couple of months, I have been test driving the Canon R5 and the Canon R6. And it got to the point where I had to box those guys back up along with the RF lenses and send them back to Canon. And it was around about that time that I decided that I was going to buy one of these mirrorless cameras from Canon. So this is how I came to my conclusion of which one I was going to buy, the Canon R5 or the Canon R6. So back at the beginning of March, I got the Canon R6 on a test drive from Canon UK. Now the RF glass that I had with the Canon R6 really lent itself to some landscape photography, some product photography, and trying out a little bit of macro photography. I did do a first impressions video, which I'll link just up here. I really enjoyed using the camera, but if I'm perfectly honest, found it a little bit meh. It was okay. It was an enjoyable camera to use. It felt good in my hand. Had all of the features that I kind of would expect, but when thinking about it next to the DSLRs that I own, the 5D Mark IV and the 6D Mark II, I never really thought, oh wow, this camera will take over. In the first impressions video that I mentioned, there was a few things that caught me by surprise with it, just a few of the different changes made to the body and the ergonomics, but by the time the end of the trial came, I'd really got used to them. I'd tested out cropping images and printing and seen what the quality came out like, and I was really quite happy with the camera. But as I say, in terms of if I was wowed by it, the answer was no. And again, that was probably down to the subject matter that I'd been shooting during that time. In comparison to my DSLRs, I didn't really notice anything that would make me go, hey, I want to spend some money and get this camera body. Now, not so long after, the Canon R5 arrived, and the R5 came with a couple of lens choices that lent themselves more to portrait photography. And so whilst I went out and did a little bit of landscape photography, I also went and did some portrait photography, because one of the big features for these cameras that I really wanted to test out was the auto eye focus. Wow, I was blown away. The focusing system was superb. It was really, really good. That eye autofocus was fantastic. I mean, I'd heard how good this was, but I don't think I really appreciated just how good this system was going to be until I had it up to my eye and I was shooting through it, and I felt instantly within that camera, in the Canon R5, complete faith that I was going to nail focus. And out of around the 80 shots that I took on that shoot, I think it missed focus on possibly 4 of them, which is an astoundingly good hit rate. And straight away, I just knew I had to purchase one of these cameras with this autofocus eye system for that side of my business. But these cameras aren't cheap. The Canon R6 here in the UK retails at £2,500, and I think that's the same in the US in dollars, $2,500. And the Canon R5 here in the UK is £4,200, and it's $3,800 in the US. Plus then, if you are intending to use EF glass, which I would, that I already own, so need the adapter, that's an extra £100, £200, depending whether you want the control ring. So as a business, I had to weigh up those prices and the cost to my business, and then look at any additional costs. Now, in terms of the camera themselves, in relation to the specs are predominantly the same for all the things that I care about. And then what happens is it comes to want versus need. So what do I mean by want versus need? Well, very simply, I want to film video in 8K. Do I need to film video in 8K? That most definitely is no. I want 45 megapixels. Do I need 45 megapixels? Again, the answer to that is absolutely not. In fact, I spend a lot of time from shoots from the 6D Mark II, which is a 26 million pixel camera, and the 5D Mark IV, which is a 30 million pixel camera, downsizing the images that come from those to send over to clients, because clients want images to go onto their websites, and images at that size and that resolution are just too big. When I have done filming for corporate clients in the past, the request has always been for a maximum of 4K, but most of the time, most of the clients are looking for 1080p or even less, because again, for me, my clients, the majority of them are putting them onto their websites and want fast load speed. They don't want their websites to suffer slow load speeds because the images on there are too big. So as it stands already at 26 million pixels and at 30 million pixels, I'm already downsizing the resolution an awful lot, I'd say for 90% of my commercial clients. And so the need for 45 million pixels just isn't there for me. And so in terms of want versus need, I wrote myself a list. And so what was on the list? Well, starting at the top of what I wrote down, eye focusability. Right, so that is on the R5 and on the R6. 10 frames per second, which is on the R5 and the R6. In fact, both go much faster than that. I want a good low light performance. Well, both cameras have good low light performance. I want a good dynamic range. Both cameras have good dynamic range. I wanted 2 card slots, both cameras 2 card slots. I wanted it to be weather sealed. I wanted to have flip screen. I wanted to be able to adapt to the EF lenses that I already have. Both cameras do all of those things. I then went on to film and felt that 4K as a standard was something that if I had 4K in these cameras, I'm happy with that. 4K 60 particularly, well, both cameras have 4K 60. I wanted 120 frames per second. Both cameras have 120 frames per second. So in terms of all of those bits, both cameras are exactly the same. I didn't really care too much about the megapixels, so then it comes down to the one spec that I did care about, which was the price. You know, I could have gone with the R5, but I went with the Canon R6. And what turned it in the Canon R6's favour? Well, actually, it became all of the other things that I would have needed to spend money on in order to really and truly get the best out of the Canon R5. What I found when I was testing out the Canon R5, first and foremost, was that my monitor just didn't resolve it well enough. At 1.1, the Canon R5 looked absolutely splendid, just superb, really crisp, really high resolution. But I don't view my images at 1.1. You bear in mind that on a 4K screen, that there is 8 million pixels available on a 4K screen. So every single one of those pixels in the Canon R5 is being squashed down. In fact, you're losing something like 4 out of 5 pixels being mushed together to fit onto a 4K resolution monitor. It was then the fact that in Lightroom, it was struggling. My computer was struggling to handle the files. It was handling the files. It just wasn't as fast as I'm used to, and I really noticed a lag speed when working. So a new computer would be needed. It was then things like, I really appreciate the fact that the Canon R6 has 2 SD UHS 2 cards, whereas the Canon R5 utilizes CF Express and a UHS 2 SD card. To get 3 cards for CF Express, which I would feel that I would need, even the 64 gigabyte ones, skimping a little bit from 1 to 8, which is where I would normally sit at, that was £400, plus then the card reader was £50. So that was an extra £450 just on memory card. I then knew I would have to get more storage because each of the Canon R5 files came in at around 50 megabytes average, give or take. Now, if you are shooting at a wedding, bringing home 1,000 images from a wedding day, then that's 50 gigabytes of storage. Do that 20 times a year, you need a lot more storage. Plus then the fact that I only just shoot weddings all of the other photo shoots that I do. And the storage costs just become a little bit silly. So as a business, I'm making a business decision, and all I could see with the Canon R5 were the costs mounting. And ultimately, that's where the wants versus needs came in. I decided I needed these cameras for a specific feature that it gave to me. But then I have to consider the return on investment. And the fact of the matter is that whenever I book clients for a portrait session, I have never, ever, ever, ever been asked how many megapixels my camera has. I've never been asked what type of camera I have, certainly not for anything other than casual conversation. When it comes to printing, and I've heard people talk about, oh, you won't be able to crop. Well, I've actually produced fantastically good detailed images from 8 megapixel files back in 2008 when some of the best cameras had around 8 megapixels. It's not like we weren't seeing huge prints. We were seeing huge prints. Galleries were still open. Billboards still existed. So megapixels really weren't a concern to me. Printing really wasn't a concern to me because I know even from 20 megapixels, I'm still going to be able to produce really large files. And so whilst the Canon R5 is an absolutely superb camera, I loved it a lot, had a lot of time for it. It was for all of those reasons that I went and I bought the Canon R6 rather than the Canon R5. And having already done one portrait session with this camera, I can tell you, I am absolutely ecstatic that I made that decision because this is just superb for that type of photography. Anything with eyes, really. And so that's why I chose the Canon R6 over the Canon R5. Nothing to do with whether one was better than the other. Let's face it, the Canon R5 is far more specced up than the Canon R6, but the fact of the matter is you pay for those specs, and if you don't need those specs, then why would I pay for them? So you can be sure that you'll be seeing more of me putting the Canon R6 through its paces. I'm going to share some hints and tips about how I'm setting it up and how I'm using it. So please do hit that subscribe button if you want to come along for the journey. And if you've already subscribed to the channel, thank you very much. I've been Dave, and this has been Let's Click Photography. And from me for now, ciao.